You're in the Business Insurance Zone with me, Steve Savant, national financial columnist and financial color commentator. This week on The Biz, our personal performance series. And on today's show, taking charge of your emotions with sports psychologist and performance coach, Dr. Jack Singer.
When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Well, welcome everyone to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm your host, Steve Savant, and we're broadcasting live to a nationwide audience of financial advisors right here in Fountain Hills, Arizona, home of America's largest fountain. And today, day two with me, have Couch Will Travel, Dr. Jack Singer. Hey, Jack.
Nice to see you.
Appreciate you being here. If you missed our show yesterday, honestly, don't watch the show yet. Hop back out to our site, www.brokersalliance.com. As soon as you come to our homepage, click on the red on-demand button, hit the archive, and watch yesterday's show because I think we're kind of building blocks.
Right.
And I think this would be very important. Today, we're talking about taking charge of your emotions, and oh my gosh, I think I'm going to have to do a little role playing here today. If anybody is emotional and feeling oriented, it is me, and I feel good about my viewership, and I like what they're doing, but maybe I need to go through a little bit of therapy myself. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with going through therapy.
No, not at all. There's a lot of good things about going through therapy as long as you go through it with a good therapist. Mm-hmm. Because like every other profession, there are good therapists, there are not so good therapists, you know?
Well, Dr. Jack, the reason you're on here is because not only you're a good therapist, but you know, you've been on ESPN Sports, you've been on Fox Sports, on all these other media outlets dealing with high performance athletes. And to me, I couldn't get anybody else on here to talk and help us because we really want to move on in our practice. We want to know how to up our game and really move into a whole area of performance that really is fulfilling. And let's talk about that because taking charge of your emotions, people have bad days, we all do. And I might be, let's say, unhappy with my performance.
Yeah.
And others might be there. Talking about type A driver emotives, well, you say type A traits, I just kind of ID'd myself there. Talk a little bit about type A traits and the good and the bad.
Okay. Well, you know, type A personality was discovered a long time ago by two cardiologists, actually, and I think it's an interesting story to tell you how they discovered it. One day, the office manager for these two cardiologists in San Francisco came into the doctors and said, we need to get the chairs in the waiting room reupholstered. And they said, well, what's going on with the chairs? So they brought them out there and they said, look, at the fronts of the chairs and the armrests of the chairs are worn. The rest of the chairs are fine. And they said, well, why would only the front of the chair and the armrest be worn? So they decided for a couple of weeks to kind of peek through the window and look at what was going on in the waiting room. And they found the majority of their patients were very anxious, rubbing the arm of the chair like impatient, I can't wait to get in there. And that's how the wearing was. And the cardiologist said, this seems to be a similar personality characteristic of a lot of the patients we see who have heart issues. And that's how they discovered that type A personality type, which they described, and I'll describe a little more as we go on, actually can lead to heart problems and other issues like that because of what it does to you inside your body. So we have to be, type A people are very successful, but we have to be careful and we have to know when to put the stops on.
Well, how do we put the stops on? I mean, I'm talking about my own personal confession here. Steve, the type A driver emotive himself, and I don't mind doing a little bit of, sitting on the couch today because I know that many of our producers are at the same area I'm at. I do enjoy the conquering aspects of being a type A, right, but I also want to stay away from the things that can draw back and actually be counterproductive.
Well, you know, when we talk about some of the traits, Steve, we talk about hurry sickness. Sometimes type A people will finish your sentence for you. I've never seen you do that, by the way. That's one trait you don't have, where people will finish your sentence because they want you to hurry up and get on with it. They think they know where you're going with it. They're impatient. Rapid speaking, which is a trait you do have, very rapid speaking, and sometimes people can't keep up with that. Competitive, win-lose kind of black and white thinking that, you know, if I'm not hugely successful, I feel like a failure, like there's nothing in between. That's an unfortunate trait of some type A people. Finishing other people's sentences I already talked to you about, and certainly getting angry or irritable rather quickly when you don't get what you want when you want it is a trait. Like people who get upset if someone cuts you off in traffic. You follow the person to the exit and start yelling at the person. These are some extremes of type A behavior because part of the whole issue of type A is wanting to control everything in your life because the fear is if I can't, I'll lose it all.
Now, what's the root of that, though? I mean, you know, this is the outward manifestation. What's causing this?
The root of that almost always comes from some kind of a childhood scenario where mom or dad or neither gave you the right time of day. It was never quite good enough, and you just kept trying harder and harder and harder to get their approval. And the sad thing is that many times the parent will die before ever saying you really were okay. And so a lot of that's where that comes from. I need to control everything because otherwise I'll lose everything. Now, interestingly, most of these traits, Steve, are inherited. Yeah.
When you mean by inherited, are you talking about environmental, or no, you're saying genetic?
Genetic, yeah. Yeah, personalities are genetic. They're not environmental. You can tweak them a little bit with the environment and change unfortunate behaviors that you're aware of with the environment, but the basic personality traits that someone has are genetic, and they come from a parent or a grandparent or someone like that. I myself have a daughter who's an attorney who's an extreme type A. She's way more type A than I am, and that came from somewhere else in the gene pool because her mother isn't that way either. But needing to control everything, and, you know, becoming an attorney was probably a good idea for her. But when you carry it out in the rest of your life where you have to control everything because you're afraid you'll lose it, that's when you have a problem.
And I remember we were talking off camera, sometimes in your business that works, but now you're bringing it home on the domestic front, and that same application in business does not work at home.
No, it doesn't. So let's think about a producer who's an extreme type A who happens to be successful. You know, when people are successful, sometimes they assume it's because of the way I am. They don't consider I might be more successful if I tweaked it.
Wow, that'd be a hard sell to type A driver motives who are making six-figure money day in and day out, saying, this has got me this far, I'm going to stick with it. But you're saying a little bit of modification may, you know, put you to the next level way bigger than you already are.
Absolutely, especially if you can relax along the way.
Well, when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Jack and talk about all these things about getting control of your emotions. I feel like I'm on the couch. And don't forget to enroll at IULUniversity.com for the best training, education, and sales support when it comes to life insurance for retirement income.
You're listening to the insurance industry's #1 resource for products, planning ideas, carrier information, and interviews you can use. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm Steve Savant with Dr. Jack Singer. And remember, you can order today's chart toppers. Just hop out to our website at thebiz.tv. That's thebiz.tv. And just a heads up before moving forward with anything here on the show, especially if we ever talk about taxes, always consult your tax advisor. And if you're FINRA licensed, your broker-dealer compliance officer. We're talking about taking charge of your emotions. The emotions can be very positive, and sometimes they can get us in some bailiwicks that we really don't want to be in. When we were talking about the things we talked about first half, I go, okay, you've ID'd the problem. We're talking about root causes. Is this fixable?
It's very fixable. In fact, the two doctors who wrote the original book, Type A Behavior in Your Heart, wrote another book on fixing type A behavior in your heart. It really is all about the ways you can modify your behavior in a way that won't get in the way of your business performance, but will allow you to relax and quit turning on that nervous system that'll affect your immune system. So there are many ways you can tweak these traits without having to change your personality. You know, a lot of times people come to me and say, well, I'm having a lot of trouble, but I don't want to have to change the way I am. I say, you don't have to change the way I am. You just have to understand what the issues are and tweak a few things, and we can learn to do that.
Well, if I'm thinking about some of the processes to walk through, what would be like my first entry level? Well, first of all, I guess identifying it would be the biggest one.
Right. Yeah, most people don't know what the problem is. They just feel tense, irritable. They're having arguments at home, and it could be anybody. I deal with physicians who have these problems as well as athletes and producers and financial planners. And so I start talking to them about various things in their lives and what they need to control and things like that. And it's only within the first session I can tell them whether they seem to have type A behaviors. And then once they have type A behaviors, I talk about the ones that work for them and the ones that aren't working well for them. An example comes to mind of a surgeon who said, I don't think there's anything wrong with me, but my wife said I need to go see you. So I said, okay, why do you suppose she said that? And he said, well, if someone doesn't hand me the instrument that I want when I want it, I'm liable to throw a scalpel at that person, but doesn't everyone do that? And so he had nurses and assistants in the waiting room dodging because he was firing scalpels at them, and he thought everyone does that. That's a normal behavior. It doesn't mean I'm angry. So sometimes people have to get insight as to what they're really doing and how it comes across.
I'm kind of curious about one thing you said well, a couple of things in the first segment, but this hurry sickness, that is an endemic of this situation with type A, right?
It is.
I mean, give me an expression. How does that manifest in a day?
It manifests by people being multitasking, that they have to do multiple things at once, that they feel that they can't leave the office until they've accomplished A, B, C, D, and E, because I don't want to have it left for tomorrow. And they're in a rush and they're impatient. They don't like standing in lines. They get irritable when they have to stand in lines. Let's say they only have an hour for lunch and they want to go to the bank and there's a line there. They actually get irritated instead of saying to themselves, okay, this is something that's not in my control. What is in my control? I can go do other errands. I can come back here tomorrow or later or what have you. But they're sitting there saying, no, I should be able to do this now. So type A people frequently use should statements on themselves. I should do this, I should be able to do that, he shouldn't do this to me, and that's an irrational kind of thinking.
Is this the guy that was cutting in line in high school then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm
Exactly.
thinking, I have to confess, I am on time, gotta be there, let's go, I don't want to smell the roses on the way over.
Yeah.
At the same time, I learned to modify because I don't like standing in line at lunch, I don't, so I go early.
Right.
I changed that about 10 years ago. I got fed up with being unhappy with the line, and everybody's going to the lunch hour at lunch hour, which is,
you
of course,
made a rational modification. It doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt anybody else, and it actually helps you to not be irritated. That's very rational. But a lot of people don't think that way. They just say, I should be able to get it the way I want it and when I want it. And again, if they take that home, they become like a domineering father or mother or what have you, instead of being someone who's compassionate and listening to the feelings of your children and your spouse and so forth.
We also talked about in the first segment, competitive, and boy, I have to say, I am there. I mean, I look at competitive product lines, I'm looking at who's number one, who ranks, the contractual language, the provisions inside the policies. I own that space in knowledge base. When I look at competition, I do kind of look at a spreadsheet, black and white.
Yeah. Well, what happens is people who are competitive and are successful get rewarded for being competitive. So the thought is, I'm going to keep doing this, or I even need to keep doing this to keep my edge. Whereas if you relaxed more, the edge may be there or even better because you're calming down your body. I guess one of the messages I'm giving, Steve, is that everybody needs to think about the fallout from type A behavior. Yes, you're successful, but there's a fallout somewhere. Somebody's paying a price. Your children aren't seeing you, for example. You're not going to their games. You're not involved in their school. Your wife hardly sees you. You don't go on vacations, because type A people frequently don't like to relax because they think they're wasting time. So they don't go on vacations. They don't get away from it. And all of these things add up to internal turmoil that can lead to illness.
Well, when we talk about performance-based for producers, we're always trying to up our game, and I hear that, but I'm also hearing a caution. So I'm hearing both at the same time. How can I have the best of both worlds here? How can I have the performance that comes with the reward of production, and also I don't become so imbalanced that it's now counterproductive?
Yeah, the thing is to build into your life things that relax you and calm you. I mean, simple things like getting involved with music or going on nature hikes. Plan them and make sure you stick to them so that you're not all in one sphere.
Well, I really appreciate you shrinking my head here for that. I'm sure I'm going to get email traffic on this. If we don't come and confess our sins, what are we going to be left with, right? a poor image that doesn't really exist.
Right.
Really, when you think about it. Remember, you can watch this show and all our shows this week with Dr. Jack right on our on-demand section. Just hit the button right on our homepage at www.brokersalliance.com. Well, that's the Buzz on the Biz for today. Get in the zone, the business insurance zone.
You're listening to the insurance industry's #1 resource for products, planning ideas, carrier information, and interviews you can use. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.